Welcome back. Let's take you here now. The ANC's 55th National Conference is scheduled to take place from the 16th to the 20th of December 2022 at the Johannesburg Expo Centre in Nasrec. Now, SABC News specialist researcher Zinziswa Mani joins me in the studio to discuss the ANC's history. So, welcome, Zinzi. Second day. So, yesterday we spent the better part just discussing the ANC's formation, since 1912, looking at some of the most revolutionary leaders, of the ANC's time. So it took us basically up to around about 1989, 1990. Yes. So let's now, talk about ANC post-democracy and just bring us into speed in terms of that era and what that party represented back then.
Okay, before we get to democracy, we start, because yesterday we ended at negotiations. And just after as negotiations to come back and political parties unbanned, Mandela comes out and everyone is happy. And the ANC holds its 48th National Conference. This was a historic conference because it was the first time in 30 years the ANC got together in the country, and it was held in Durban. Mandela was elected president. And they also brought in the people in the movement who are inside structures, like Cyril Ramaphosa became the Secretary General at that time. And we saw some UDF people also becoming members of the NEC. And then between 1990 and 94, we see rampant violence happening. This is actually overlapping the CODESA negotiations that were happening. This was actually such a difficult time for the country, because we saw violence like the Boipatong massacre. We saw the AWB actually stormed the negotiations themselves, and we saw things like the Shell massacre happening. It was a very difficult time, the early 90s, and the ANC loses two of its most influential leaders, Chris Hani, Oliver Tambo. In fact, Chris Hani is a topical point right now as we speak because of Janusz's release. Yeah? Yes, this was a very important time in our history.
And I'd like us to go back to that when the slide concludes, because I think that you are correct in terms of, how topical this is. In fact, even CODESA today.
Yes. And April 1994, we see Mandela becoming, obviously, the first president of the country. And the unity government is established. Then the TRC happens. And within the TRC, one of the first scandals that we saw that faced the ANC, Bantu Holomisa comes out, says Stella Stau accepted some bribes from Saul Kesner. This actually brought on the first breakaway of the ANC in post-democratic South Africa.
With the UDM.
With the UDM, because Bantu Holomisa gets kicked out because he embarrassed the party. He wasn't supposed to speak out about the corruption that was happening. And then just after that, we see the 1997... the
ANC conference with Winnie Madikizela Mandela.
Yes. Now, that conference, we saw in this conference Winnie Madikizela Mandela being asked to step aside, actually to decline nomination for deputy to make way for Jacob Zuma. This was because some people saw her as tainted. This came actually from the TRC with the Stompy matter. And this was actually the first time, in fact, that a woman could have been a deputy president. We've actually never seen the ANC have a woman who's a deputy president or president ever since then. And this was such an important part of its history that we saw. And then in 1999, Thabo Mbeki becomes the second democratic president of the ANC. This is after Mandela stepped down after his first term. Soon after that, the scandal of the arms deal comes through. Patricia de Lille presented this, the dossier in Parliament, talking about the people who are implicated there are Jacob Zuma, Shabir Sheikh, and Tony Yenge.
Yeah.
The former president, Jacob Zuma, is still fighting those corruption charges.
And who can forget 2007 when Becky's ousted as ANC president at Bulgaria? In fact, you talked about the first breakaway in the early 90s, and now this also, bringing about the second, prominent again, I would imagine, a breakaway with COPE.
Yes, a lot of people left the ANC, prominent members of the ANC, Tera Likota, Mbazi Mashilowa, Smart Ngonyama. The former deputy president of the country, Ms. Phumzile Ngcuka, was also affiliated with COPE at the time. And these were the pro-Mbeki people who left because after the arms deal saga also comes June 2005, where former President Jacob Zuma, at the time his deputy, he gets fired by Thabo Mbeki because he was implicated in the arms deal, because the court found that Shabir had made some corrupt payments to the former president. And then the factionalism in the ANC, it
became
started
more prominent.
Yes.
Because we know, of course, it was there. It's a historic thing that was there, probably traced around about the 1960s, I believe we talked about yesterday. I mean, just going back to the second kind of era of slides that we were showing, where we reference Chris Hani and we reference CODESA. I mean, as you rightfully said, we can't not talk about it because, I mean, it is at this point where South Africa was upset, and of course it brought in mixed emotions around the release of his killer, back in 1993. And of course, we know that Chris Hani was also influential in those CODESA talks and discussions. And he was very vocal in terms of some of the things that he did not believe that needed to be introduced there. And I mean, just recently, some leaders were calling out for an economic CODESA, that needs to probably make way, in this time and era. And of course, they're referencing what was then described as the clause that was described against, a CODESA called the sunset clause.
Yes.
I think reference was made around that in terms of how that was the deal breaker in terms of, the kind of country that we have today. I mean, those are crucial elements, of that era.
Yes, you are right, because as you say, the sunset clauses, they guaranteed white people a stake in the new democratic South Africa. So these are some of the contentions that are in the forefront today. Yes.
All right, Zinzi, thank you so much for that. I mean, as we, of course, go into the national conference that's taking place on the 16th until the 20th, which is just in 8 days' time, by the way. We'll keep on, bringing back, just some of these historical moments with this party as we look back at the history of the ANC. We'll continue to give you a little bit of snippet and history behind this party with 110 years.